What's going on? It's Jack with Jack Banks MMA, and today we're looking at early betting ideas for UFC 282, Blachowicz versus Ankalaev. Now, if you guys have been under a rock or you haven't heard, the main event changed from Yuri Prohaska versus Glover Teixeira to the aforementioned Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev. And this was a fight that was already scheduled to take place. The only difference is now it's going to take place for the light heavyweight championship, and it's going to be over 5 rounds instead of 3. Now, first thing I want to mention is off the bat, because we're going to start the main event and then move our way backwards on this card to some of the other fights that I think I have some value for you guys. I haven't had a good read on Ankalaev so far in his UFC run. I've expected him to win, but I have thought that the odds have been too far in his favor. I did put a little bit of a bet on Anthony Smith the last time. Now, Anthony Smith gets that leg injury. Who knows how the fight would have taken place without it, but I have to admit, as somebody who bet Anthony Smith, Ankalaev looked pretty good in that fight. And so with that being said, I have definitely underrated Ankalaev in the past, and I think it's important for me to address that bias because in this fight, I think Jan Blachowicz has a chance, and partially very well could be because of my bias. But number one, we saw Blachowicz do pretty well with the takedowns of Alexander Rakic, which, you know, it makes you wonder, right? Like, he really struggled. He really struggled with Glover and his takedowns. Was that just, he was having a bad day? Historically, he's been pretty good. I wouldn't say he's like great against. He doesn't have like a great takedown defense, but he's not terrible either. So that's part of it. And with Ankalaev, he mixes in both the takedowns and his ability on the feet. I think Ankalaev, like in his strategy, he's perfectly fine if it stays on the feet the entire time. He only really likes to mix it in when he feels like he's got an advantage or if he needs to. So I could see this fight staying on the feet for a good majority of the fight. So I think on the feet, I think it could be pretty close. And for that reason, I still think Ankalaev deserves to be the favorite? Yes. But I don't think it should be like in the 70 percentile range where it's at right now. I have it close to like 62, like minus 165 versus minus 240. So that's one area where I do think there could be some value. The other prop I'm looking for, or I guess prop I'm looking for on that specific fight is the over 2.5. I think it goes over more times than it doesn't. I do think it's a coin flip, though. I could see it going under. You just never know. But both of those guys I could see, and Ankalaev especially, without the Smith injury, like historically he goes longer in his fights, and Blachowicz doesn't really go away. So, unless Ankalaev is able to implement the grappling, which I don't think he's going to be able to for lengthy periods of time. Like, I think he'll mix it in, working a takedown against the cage, but I think Blachowicz will either be taken down quickly and get back up or be able to prevent most of the takedown. So I like that over 2.5. If you can get it at plus money or even slightly, negative, I think that makes sense. Next up, co-main event, guys. I'm going to try to make it pretty quick from here on out. It's going to be Paddy Pimblett taking on Jared Gordon. This is the toughest test of Paddy Pimblett's UFC career. I think the most important, the prop I feel most confident about, or bet rather, I feel most confident about, is a prop, and that's the over 1.5. I think it goes over 60% of the time. There's been a bit of a trend with Paddy Pimblett. It's not 100%, but his fights have gotten a little bit longer. The first fight was near the end of the first round he finished. The second fight was actually a little bit quicker, but then the Jordan Levitt fight went a little bit longer, and I think the difference was Levitt's level of grappling was better than the previous two opponents. Jared Gordon is not as good a grappler as Jordan Levitt, but he's much better on the feet, which is going to give Paddy Pimblett some issues, I think, and Gordon is a decent defensive grappler. Not great. I would say like above average. Let's be real. He does a pretty good job with, like, for example, the Jared Solecki fight. He did a good job with Solecki because Solecki is more position over submission, and so I think he will be able to stay out of trouble with Paddy at least early on. But I think as the fight goes on, I could see Pimblett getting a late finish in this one. Hopefully after that 1.5 rounds. I think the odds on this one are actually pretty spot on. I have them pretty similar to where they're currently set. Next up on the main card is Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on Robbie Lawler. Again, a fight I think is pretty well lined. Like, I think a lot of the fights for UFC 282 at this point are well lined. I think Ponzinibbio, he should win. Like, right off the bat, I think he wins minus 300, 75%. Right now, the bookies have him at minus 400, which is 80%. So there's this, a small bit of value if you're going off my line on Robbie Lawler. The reason being, I think Robbie Lawler looked pretty good up until Brian Barberena was able to take over and get him moving backwards. And it's more than likely going to be a stand-up, a boxing affair. So I think in that kind of fight, Robbie Lawler does have a chance. But I do think Ponzinibbio is going to press forward and probably get a finish in this fight. I will probably look to add Ponzinibbio as a parlay piece, but I won't be looking to add him as a straight money line play. All right, next up for me, guys, is going to be Darren Till versus Dricus du Plessis, or Duplessis, I should say. And if this fight takes place like 2 years ago, I think the odds are very different. And now we should, admit that there is a reason why, the odds are where they are, because Darren Till hasn't been fighting with any bit of consistency. He can struggle with volume, with a lack of output, I should say. And Duplessis does not struggle with that at all. And so you say that, and you look at the consistent, I guess the amount of fights Duplessis has had in the past couple of years, the step up in competition he's had from Marcus Perez to Trevin Giles. Then last fight he gets Brad Tavares. So it feels like he's ready for this. That's the opportunity against Darren Till. Not to mention he's 2 fights against Roberto Soldic, who's one of the better fighters outside of the UFC, regardless of weight class. So this is a fight where Duplessis, I think, he'll be able to utilize both his, I don't even know what to call his striking style. Like, it's a madness, really. Like, he launches forward. He'll throw like 3 or 4, 5 strikes at a time. He's got really long range kicks. He's got decent grappling. Although in the Tavares fight, he was like kind of forcing it, and that cost him the first round. He's got great cardio. Just great cardio. Everyone thought, I shouldn't say everyone, the commentary team thought he was going to gas out in that fight against Tavares, and he got stronger as the fight went on. So Duplessis, tremendous cardio. Now on the flip side, I think Duplessis' striking style is going to give Darren Till problems, but also will prevent opportunities for Darren Till to get a finish. And the reason I'm saying that is because if you watch the Robert Whittaker fight, who I think is a better version of the Duplessis style. You got a guy who kind of likes to launch forward into his attacks, but also can mix in some grappling. And Darren Till, when in the first round, when Robert Whittaker went to launch in one of his initial strikes, Darren Till just met him with a quick elbow and sat down Robert Whittaker early. And then, as the fight went on, Darren Till struggled, and actually in the second round, he got caught when Robert Whittaker kind of lunged forward and caught him with a strike as well, which is why I say I can see this going both ways. But I do think Darren Till is a better striker than Duplessis, which means to me Duplessis is going to need to work in the grappling. And while we've seen Darren Till struggle with the grappling, definitely in his last fight against Derek Brunson, I don't think Duplessis has the same level of wrestling that Brunson has. And so I think this fight should actually be a bit closer. If the line on Duplessis gets bigger as the week goes on, I will look to add a straight a straight play on Darren Till. The last thing on this specific fight I want to mention, though, I really don't think this goes a distance. Like, over 60% of the time, I would say minus 175 is what I lined it at. I just don't see these two fighters going the distance. Could be wrong. I'm not too heavy, just over 60%, but I could see a finish in this fight with the lack of activity from Darren Till and the fighting style from Dricus du Plessis, where he does get hit a lot. This could be the fight that doesn't go the distance. So, speaking of fights that don't go the distance, this one will be quick. Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking on Chris Daukaus. I got Rozenstruik. I think the odds are right in terms of the money line. I'm taking Rozenstruik inside the distance via knockout in this fight. As long as I can get that at plus money, I will look to play that. And this fight will not go the distance. I mean, it could go the distance. This is MMA, but as a bettor, I think it doesn't go the distance like 80% of the time. Daukaus hasn't been to the distance as far as I know in the UFC. Rozenstruik may have been once against Curtis Blades, but very different style. And obviously, he did almost go the distance against Overeem, and then he ended it in incredible fashion. So we'll see, but I think Rozenstruik is looking to get back from the Volkov win, whereas Daukaus, I think, could still be a little tentative from his last two performances. I think Rozenstruik comes in, gets a first round TKO, if not early second round. Next up is going to be, actually, I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video. This is another fight I think there could be some value on here. For me, I really am going to go back and watch the tapes. Let me know what you guys think. But this is going to be Chris Curtis versus Joaquin Buckley. Off the bat, guys, I have the odds almost the exact opposite way as they are currently. Currently, Joaquin Buckley is a minus 130 favorite. I have Chris Curtis as a minus 150 favorite. I should preface this, though, by saying I did think when I said that this could be a fight that Buckley wins. But I'm surprised that he is the favorite in this fight. I think Curtis has the takedown defense to not have to worry about the newfound wrestling of Joaquin Buckley. And I think Curtis's boxing is better because he's got the straight shots versus Joaquin Buckley's looping shots. The concern I had and the reason why I thought maybe Buckley gets it done here, but I don't agree with the odds, is Buckley's age. He's 7 years younger than Chris Curtis. And so I do think that is a factor. Both guys could fight at welterweight, but I think Buckley's the more likely of the two to move down a weight class, which again, I think actually favors Chris Curtis. The only thing I really see here that is in Buckley's favor is the age. So again, I think there's value in Chris Curtis, and I'm going to review, let's do some more tape study, but I think I'm going to be looking to play Chris Curtis. Next up for me is Eric Silva versus TJ Brown. Eric Silva had a tremendous Contender Series fight. He took advantage of a stylistic mismatch, potentially a size mismatch, according to Dana White. But man, he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He went in and he took the kickboxer down and he finished him. Some brutal ground and pound, some elbows. And the only thing that I have concerns about with Eric Silva is his age. He's 35 years old. If Eric Silva was 30 years old, I would have him as a minus 250 favorite in this fight against TJ Brown. Since he's not, or rather, since he is 35 years old, I have him as a minus 180 favorite. I will probably look to play Eric Silva in this fight. I haven't seen it from TJ Brown. I've seen him out-grapple or out-wrestle some fighters, but really not too high competition. His real, one of his better wins of late was against Charles Rosa, who's not looked good in a few years now. So if there's a fight that Eric Silva is going to win in the UFC, I would think it's this one. And I think Eric Silva is a pretty good fighter. So I do think he gets it done against TJ Brown. Last up for me is going to be Vinicius Salvador taking on Daniel Da Silva. I do think Vinicius Salvador should be the favorite. I have him as a minus 200, no, minus 175. That's where I have him at. Minus 175 favorite. Currently, he's around a minus 200 favorite on the books, which I think is about fair. But if I were to play this fight, just because, look, Vinicius Salvador's track record is not the best coming onto the Contender Series. He looked phenomenal in that fight, but it's a lot to base on one fight itself. I think the way to play this fight against De Silva is that the fight doesn't go the distance, or under 2.5 rounds even, I think makes a lot of sense. De Silva, he's gotten into the second round, early second round in his first fight against Molina, but a lot of first round finishes pre-UFC for him. And in the UFC, he's been finished, under 1.5 rounds every time. So I think there's some value. We'll see what the line ends up being, but that's the way that I would play it. Let me know what you guys think on my UFC 282 betting ideas here, and what are your thoughts? What are some of your bets for the big pay-per-view? I'll see you guys next week.